Welcome to Campus Consortium's EdTalks webinar series. Our presenters for today's session are Jake Fowler, Director of Campus Technology from Kansas City Art Institute, Chris Kincaid, Chief Technology Officer from University of Redlands, and Dr. Carl Horvath, President at Campus Consortium. We will take questions at the end of today's presentation. Please enter the question into the chat box or questions pane in your Zoom control panel. Without further ado, please allow me to present Jake Fowler, Chris Kincaid, and Dr. Carl Horvath. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you very much, Lily. Much appreciated. And thank you, everyone, for attending today. We have a great turnout, and today we'll be covering an important topic for higher education, and that is getting access to resources, but doing it affordably. We have a good panel today. Jake and Chris have already started on this journey, and we will be exploring how they got to where they're at today. They have worked through Campus Consortium to work with one of our partners to find an affordable and valuable solution that it works for their environment. So first, let me just tell you a little bit about Campus Consortium. It's founded in 2003. And the Campus Consortium is a nonprofit that was founded by about 14 schools at the time. This was after the dot-com bubble burst, and schools were trying to find an affordable way to collaborate and work together without reinventing the wheel. And at the time, they came together and created this consortium, which has really expanded out to many more schools over the past 18 years. The consortium's mission is to help members reduce time, reduce cost, and effort. And that is so important today, especially with the effects of COVID. In terms of budgets have been significantly reduced. Staff positions in all departments, but including IT, have been reduced. And so we have less resources and less people to help us solve for the problem of adding more technology, since most every school has had to completely go to online, or at least partially, and had to create a mobile workforce for staff and faculty. So the consortium is really trying to address this concern right now and help schools not only survive the pandemic, but going on as things change over the next few years and continuing on into the next decade, we will see the influence of technology. How can schools afford this with the situation as it is now with the pandemic and other factors that have affected the higher education sector? Some of our partners have made it possible for us to be here today, and if I know that there's a few vendors, higher ed vendors that have signed up to be on today's webinar. We have mostly higher education institutions attending today, but we do have a few higher ed vendors, and we'd welcome to talk with you if you're interested in become a partner of Campus Consortium. But thanks to our partners who make this EdTalk and other resources available and possible for our members. We do have relevant grants. Campus Consortium offers in-kind grants to every higher ed institution. We have one that's relevant today: automating student staff onboarding and onboarding identity management, and single sign-on and smart password manager with MFA grant. So these deadlines are toward the end of the month. If you're interested in applying for these, we can arrange a meeting and help you find a solution. So I'd like to start out with a little bit about what is identity and access management. It's going to explain very quickly a couple of these terms so we are all on the same page in terms of the discussion moving forward. I've had to deal with some of these in my role as CIO in multiple institutions over the years, and it's really evolved over the past 15 to 20 years. There are many different factors that are required to ensure that our students, staff, and faculty have access to the resources they need and timely access. Also, and secure access. So we'll be talking about a bit more about that as we move on. Identity and access management is about roles and the privileges of people on the network. Network just doesn't have to be on campus. It can be using the internet to access resources, but we have to make sure that for people to do their jobs, for teaching and learning to happen appropriately, that everybody can access the applications and the data resources that they need to access. And identity and access management is ensuring that you have the right role and the right access and that it's secure access. And to get these roles, accounts have to be created. And I know that all of our institutions have to create accounts for new students and new employees, new faculty when they begin their engagement with the institution. And those account processes have varied over the years, at least in the institutions I've worked with. And they've been everything from a simple script to complex systems. But in every case, the attempt has been to generate an account for a new person so they can use that during their engagement with the institution. So user provisioning is often what it's called, and it's the process of allocating these privileges we just talked about and permissions, and to do it securely. The account provisioning is getting an account for a new student, staff, or faculty, and deprovisioning is equally as important. It's taking away these accounts so they are not usable anymore. We all have had students graduate and employees and faculty leave universities and colleges. And then, I know sometimes, a couple months later, somebody says, hey, this account's still active, and that is not a good situation. So again, it's a securing assets and ensuring that, everybody has access or doesn't have access when appropriate. Also, there is multi-factor authentication. You may have heard more and more about this. Years ago, this was, oh, well, that's extra security. Not so sure if we really need that today. It's becoming an essential part of how we have to manage our users' access to systems, especially critical systems and sensitive information. There are student information systems, there's financial aid data, there are all kinds of resources that require extra levels of protection. People are now connecting remotely into institutions instead of coming on campus. So we have to make sure that we protect the university's assets and resources. And by doing that, we have to add extra layers of protection. Of course, we want to keep usability high, so it's easy for people to access their information, even though they have to provide additional credentials. We want to make sure that who is connecting remotely is the person that should be getting to the resources. So rather than just asking for a username and password, multi-factor authentication requires additional credentials, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But it's really important in today's mobile workforce to ensure that the people connecting are the appropriate people. And then finally, what is single sign-on? Single sign-on is an authentication process that allows students, staff, and faculty to use one set of credentials, say a name and a password, to access all the applications that they would ever need to use. So it's a easier way to log in and then be able to connect and use everything that you need. Some institutions have multiple logins for multiple systems, and this can be time consuming. You forget your passwords. It generates more tickets for the help desk, people will have to go into reset their password all the time because they forget. I had one for this one, but I forget the one for this one. So this application. So by having one set of credentials, it really allows end users to access everything that they need to get. To do this, it needs to be set up and configured. And again, how complex is this, or how easy it is to set up, means that an institution will take this on and make it easier for the end users or not. So we have to look for the right solutions that are affordable and easy to set up and easy to manage. And that'll be some of the discussion that we'll go to today. I'd like to roll out a quick poll. This is an interactive Ed Talk, so it really would like audience participation. And if you could participate in these polls as we move along, we would like to get your feedback. How far are you on your identity access management journey? And so we just talked through a few of those points, and we would like to get an idea about where people are, how far they've gotten involved in it or not gotten involved in kind of rolling out a project in these areas, or have you implemented it and it's going great? So are you thinking about it? Are you investigating, comparing solutions, implementing, or we already have a good solution? And we'll talk through these poll questions. If you could just participate, we'll close the poll in just a few seconds, look at what your feedback is, and we'll move on from there. Today our guests have gone on this journey in terms of exploring what solutions that are out there. They have lived with solutions that are legacy systems often, and I can tell you from my experience, I've had in different institutions legacy systems that were created sometimes decades ago, or 15 years ago, or 5 years ago, but it was the best that we could do at the institution at the time. And what we want to do is find an enterprise application. But when you're in a smaller school or a school that doesn't have a budget, and especially today with the shrinking budgets, how do you afford a state-of-the-art identity access management system, or single sign-on, or multi-factor authentication? The results are in from our last poll, and looks like some people, 33%, have a good solution. Some people, 23%, are implementing, and others are thinking about it and investigating. So we've kind of spread our audience across these multiple areas here, but you can see the drive toward ensuring that institutions have an identity and access management system. And that's just going to grow and more in importance as we continue this dependency in the mobile workforce and online learning. So thank you for participating in the poll. Much appreciated. Let me introduce our first speaker today, our first panelist. And today I'd like to introduce you to Jake Fowler. So growing up in Kansas City, Missouri, Jake Fowler remembers going to the Kansas City Art Institute on the way to the neighboring Nelson Atkins Museum of Art on class field trips and thinking what a cool place it must be after working in a variety of technology-related jobs and running his own Apple-focused technology service company. An opportunity at KCAI presented itself, and he worked in IT at KCAI for 14 years in various capacities, and is currently the Director of Campus Technology. His role at KCAI is a combination of two of the things he loves most: technology and art. He feels lucky to be able to help the creative community with their technology needs. When he's not at KCAI, he might be spending time with his wife, doting on his dog, or building new Lego sets. And I'd like to introduce Jake. Jake, you could talk a little bit about Kansas City Art Institute and your experiences with identity and access management.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. I appreciate this opportunity. Yeah, so yeah, the Kansas City Art Institute is I was here when we celebrated our 125th anniversary, and I think we're approaching 135 years. So we're an old institution. We've always been very small. As you can see in the description, we have about 700 students. and about 1,000 to 1,200 total users with faculty and staff and adjuncts. So we're very, very small budget, very small staff. I have a staff of 4 people. So as Carl and I have talked about before, that doesn't mean we have less work to do. We, even though there's less people, we still have to maintain the same things, manage email and access to different applications, all that stuff. So it's less people, but it's still kind of the same processes. And with a small staff, it's been very tricky, especially as he said, with COVID, managing remote access and stuff has been a lot of work. My team has done a great job, but yeah, again, small budget, small staff. So we were in a place where we had several disparate systems that synced accounts to different tools that we use. We're a Gmail school, so we have a server that syncs our users to Gmail. We allow users to use Office 365. We have a different system to sync those users into that. So there's all sorts of stuff we manage, to allow students, our users, to have access to these tools. And they're all over the place. And sometimes they're the same password, sometimes they're not. There just wasn't any consistency. We actually started this project looking to replace an aging ADFS server for single sign-on, with which we only actually had 2 relationships with other vendors. They actually forced us to set up the ADFS server several years ago to allow for authentication for it was TMS, and I can't remember the other one right now, but tuition management services. So I was trying to replace that, looking at upgrading the ADFS server to into a version of Windows Server, or looking at a cloud server, or even we looked into Azure. When my advancement department actually found this grant opportunity through Campus Consortium and shared it with me, and I thought, well, why not? Let's see what happens. So I applied, and it turned out to be it solved several problems that I wasn't even sure I had. Again, I started out looking to replace an ADFS server, and this became a much bigger solution where we're able to do the at some point. So we're in the middle of our process right now. We just implemented the password portal, and we're getting ready to kick off the provisioning part of this, which is a much bigger part of it. But once we're done, it will automate, user creation for us, and make things much easier on my staff. Right now, our process is very manual. We basically take a spreadsheet of all the new students, and as many of you know, if you're at a school, we do this every year, sometimes twice a year, less so maybe in the middle of the year, but there's a lot of new students that come in every year. So yeah, our process is very manual. We'll take a spreadsheet, and we've managed to use a third-party app like an Active Directory manager to import those users. So it's a little bit automated, but it's still, there's all sorts of things we have to watch out for, duplicate email addresses, stuff like that. So it's still very, very manual. So I'm really looking forward to getting this. We use Genzabar, so we're looking to integrate Genzabar into Quick Launch, into our Active Directory, using Quick Launch to provision those accounts. So yeah, as I said, we just implemented the password portal. It was a very smooth transition. There were some bumps on our end with Active Directory. There were the way we had some users set up or some accounts set up didn't work with Quick Launch. We figured those out very quickly and were able to resolve them. But for the most part, it went very, very smoothly. And yeah, it's especially with the generous grant from the Campus Consortium, Quick Launch ended up being very, very affordable to us. Azure was looking to be pretty expensive. They have education discounts, but it was still going to be expensive. So yeah, I mean, as many of you I'm sure can relate to money is often the bottom line. It needs to function, but if I can't afford it, if it's not sustainable financially, then we can't, it's just not going to work for us. So this was a great option. And like I said, it ended up solving several problems that I hadn't anticipated. The single sign-on portal, again, we're still rolling out other, vendor relationships into the portal, but we've never had anything like this at KCAI. So for users to be able to go to one website and click on an icon basically to get to the tools that they need is going to be very, very useful for them. They can go there and get to Gmail and all the Google stuff that we use and any other apps we're looking to implement. We use I just forgot the name of it. Our HR system, for hours and stuff. We're looking to implement that and several other relationships. I have a whole list of apps I want to stick in there. So yeah, we're really looking forward to increasing the apps we have in our portal, but also setting up the integration with Genzabar for provisioning. That it's going to be. I'm really looking forward to it.
Jake, could I just interject and ask you just a quick question about the process of we're speaking from the IT perspective, which is great, but could you give a little perspective from other departments like HR? You just mentioned HR, and I'm sure there's enrollment admissions involved and registrar. So could you speak a little bit about how this will affect them? I know you haven't fully implemented the solution yet, but I'm sure you're in discussion with all these other departments because they'll all be affected at some point.
Absolutely. So in fact, with the admissions right now, recently the account creation process has gotten more it's getting larger for us because we end up creating user accounts for all potential students, not necessarily full Gmail accounts. They don't have full access to stuff, but we do start the user process. So they're entered into Genzabar, whether they end up coming to school here or not. So we create accounts for them in Active Directory, and then more than half of them, depends on how enrollment is going, but a lot of them don't end up, becoming actual users, and we'll end up deleting them. But it adds a lot of work to us. They've started every year for the last several years. We've started that process earlier and earlier. So this is becoming like a year-round thing. Admissions, I understand it. Admissions wants to provide as smooth a process to these potential students as possible, and make sure they do want to come to school here. So we want to help, absolutely. But yeah, it's working with them to get this process ironed out over the last few years. Again, it's very manual for us right now. If we could get this automated, as soon as they're put into Genzabar, if they get an account created in Active Directory and are able to access what they need to access, it's going to make everybody happy. My staff for sure, but also admissions. And there won't be as much, right now we set up a temporary password. They have to go in and before we had implemented the password portal, we gave them a temporary password. They had to go in and change it. We had to communicate what that password was back to them. All that with a new password portal, they can just create their account without having an initial password. So even now we're beginning to see that streamlining. Yeah, with HR, I've mentioned to them that I want to start doing this. ADP, we use ADP, implementing ADP into this, and they were like, "What does that mean?" So, I'm looking forward to that conversation with all these different departments, all their applications. Setting it up so that people can use the same password, because again, with ADP, it's a separate password that they have to keep track of. And as many of you know, I'm sure it's not necessarily a different password. They might be using the same password, just on a different system, which is not necessarily secure. If that one password gets leaked, then they have access to pretty much everything, their bank accounts, whatever. So it's better to have, if they're disparate systems like that, to have separate passwords. If there's a single sign-on solution, they're only going one place to enter that password, which will ease things for them. So yeah, it's going to impact a lot of our departments pretty directly.
Jake, I see you, we're kind of talking in this slide a little bit about cloud-based system that includes single sign-on, identity access management, password manager, and multi-factor authentication. So you're going to roll all this out. So this is going to be a sweeping change, I would imagine, across all these departments and across the institution itself. What do you think about? Are you tackling this one piece at a time, or is this something that you're trying to roll out as one implementation? Just curious a little bit about the process, and I guess the amount of effort. You said you have a kind of a smaller IT team. How is that impacting your team, and then I have a follow-up question after that.
Okay. Yeah. How's it impacting my team? I'll be honest, the password portal rollout was not timed the best, and that's totally on us. Basically, we were using a different portal. When new users would come in, we had a different portal for them to be able to reset their password, because again, we gave them a temporary password that wasn't necessarily secure. It was based on their ID number, which is not necessarily, it's easily guessable. If you know what yours is, you just add 1 to it. So it wouldn't be that hard to guess what somebody's password was. So we had to have some way for them to be, force them to reset their password. As it turns out, our license had expired, and I didn't want to renew it because I knew we were going to implement this. So there was kind of a gap there. So we ended up pushing this a little quicker than I had intended, a couple of weeks before the semester ended, which it irritated a few people, but it was as smooth as it could have been. So yeah, I mean, the impact on my staff, as with any rollout of a new system, they've been working hard to get it rolling and answer questions and get people logged in. It's a big change for our users. There's, like you said, there's a lot of good security in it. The multi-factor authentication is great, but people, one of the things you could do is add security questions, and they forget their answers sometimes. So, we have to deal with a little bit of that. But if they have everything set up, they can recover their own accounts, and that's my expectation. Is eventually they won't have to bug us. If they forget their password, they can go to the portal, and that's how we're presenting to everyone in our communications. So eventually, I hope that it will decrease the workload on my staff, and especially with the provisioning. It's going to be automated. We'll have to babysit a little bit, but we won't have to manually import everyone.
Yeah, I guess that was kind of my follow-up question too. It's like, yeah, I know you're implementing, but the flip side is that after implementation, hopefully it's going to be less work for your staff. I mean, that's why you're doing this, is to kind of take that burden off, automate some of these things intelligently, and then also hopefully it'll automate for what I found in projects like this, especially with say HR and registrar's office and other groups, so that we've been able to set better expectations about when accounts are going to be created. I don't know if you had that similar situation.
We were dealing with a little bit of that this morning. Again, if many of you are from schools, we have adjuncts that teach one semester, don't teach it the next semester. They teach infrequently. Sometimes they don't. It's not every other semester, but we're in discussions with HR, and do we disable those accounts until they come back? Who's responsible for letting us know they need to be disabled? Because we don't necessarily know who's teaching and who's not, semester to semester. So we have a lot of alumni that come back and teach. So they have existing accounts. Currently, we allow alumni to keep their emails. That's up for debate right now. That's a different conversation. But so they already have an account as an alumni, so we have to, and that, we end up just adding them to the faculty groups and all that. It's not that big a deal, but it's a lot to manage. It's a lot to manage. And yeah, when we have it fully automated with Genzabar, when their status changes in Genzabar, they'll get out of the proper groups and have access to the proper stuff through Quick Launch. So yeah, that's my big hope. It will. I mean, I hate to say my staff is going to be less busy, because they won't be. They'll just be busy with other things, more important things, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that our teams are very tight, and the dependency on technology is so increased that there's always something to do, and our teams aren't growing, right? So we, tools that are available out there that can really take the load, the burden, and again, intelligently. You don't just want to automate something for the sake of automating it, because that can absolutely create more problems than it solves. But certainly, if you can have a system that is cloud-based, as this is, that you also don't have to have the responsibility of taking care of on-premise, which I did want to ask you about that briefly before we wrap up, but I did want to kind of roll out this next poll question while we're finishing up our conversation. And this one is, identity and access management can help with, and then this is for the audience, the attendees. Please choose the appropriate one that, just to give us a sense of what people are thinking about identity and access management, and from what we've discussed so far in the intro of what identity and access management is. Will it relieve work for institutional staff? Will it improve the student, faculty, staff experience, improve student enrollment and retention, automate complex and disparate workflows? I mean, that's kind of what we've been thinking about. And, for some schools, it may be a very specific goal that they're trying to set, improve that experience for people. It's about usability. For others, it might be other issues, or it could be all of the above. So if we could ask the audience to please participate in this poll. Love to get a sense of where everybody is on this. But Jake, kind of going back to, the project itself, and I know that you had said you rolled out the password part of this project right before the end of the semester, and it was tough to work with some folks that weren't exactly 100% happy about it. It's hard to do because there's never really a good time to roll out an IT project, but are you communicating with the community? How do you, this is not like identity and access management isn't like building a new building, right? We were talking about this before. It's more about getting people access to what they need when they need it in a timely manner. So in a way, identity and access management is like, if it disappears, that's a good thing. If we don't hear about it, that's a good thing. Can you tell me how your institutional community has taken to this project? And I know you talked a little bit of some adverse issues, as with any IT project, but what's the feeling on campus about what you're doing, and is there the buy-in? And I know that when you come out on the other side of this, it'll be a lot better, but how's it going now?
Yeah, I was actually talking to one of my staff members, the primary on actually account creation, yesterday about some of this. My expectation is new students who didn't know our previous system are going to be totally fine with us. This, the new Quick Launch portal is similar to a lot of things they're already using, so it's not a big change for them. But that's the key word, and I think that's where some of the frustration came from. Is this is a big change for us. I think once people start using it, and they have, I mean, we've been using it for, not quite 2 months now. People are liking it. It is very convenient to be able to log in, like I said, log into one place and then have access to all your stuff right there via, tiles. So I think the biggest frustration that people had was that change. They just, how people are with change. It's just a new process, and if they can't get their email the way they used to right away, then there's like, oh wait, what am I doing now? I forgot I had to change this. So, again, I think they'll realize the value of it, and knowing that they, as we add more tiles to the portal, that they'll be able to access all these things in one place. That it'll be very convenient for them. Our intranet we're going to add in there, JICS, we use through Genzabar. We'll add that in there, their login for that. And again, that uses their Active Directory credentials, but it
Right.
syncs through a different system. So we have to make sure that system is still syncing, of course, until
Yeah.
we get it into quick launch. So a lot of that stuff is going to impact us more than the end users.
Right.
Being able to consolidate these things and have basically one thing we have to babysit instead of all of these things.
Right. Right.
So.
Well, hopefully, it sounds like you're on the right track, and this will be a university-wide improvement. It's also going to be a change for the future, as we discussed earlier, because a lot of institutions have to head this way because of that dependency on the technology that's used so extensively in our everyday work. There is such a dependency that wasn't there 15 years ago, 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. Today, there's a big dependency, and COVID has just accelerated that dependency. So, Jake,
Absolutely.
that was a great overview of what you're doing, and I appreciate that. And I know that folks may be asking us some questions of you as we move along. But I did want to share the results of the poll that we just ran, and that is identity and access management can help with. And so we've got responses from our audience, and looks like we have a few folks that help relieve work for their staff is important. We have some others that say they want to improve that student staff faculty experience, and others that say automate complex workflows, and all really important. I'm surprised to see that improve work student enrollment and retention is 0, but I think some of those responses are tied up in the last response, which is all the above. The retention piece and the enrollment. I mean, students are so very careful about where they are going and judging the technology, and maybe an indirect subconscious judgment of when I applied to this university, it took me forever to get my credentials or send me something through email or on the application. So we have to make sure that we're in this online space, especially that we're presenting the student with the appropriate information. These are students that probably are mostly familiar with online healthcare, online banking, online gaming, online socialization, any number of things that maybe weren't done a few years ago online. Most is online, so we have some very sophisticated users, and there's a certain expectation of how they can access these all these services, and it's no different for higher education. So yeah, I definitely agree with all the above. These impacts, across the university, even though it's kind of that gentle giant that sits in the background of IT and really keeps the inner gears of the institution working. So thank you for responding to that poll. And Jake, thank you for that presentation. I'm going to move us on to our next presenter, Chris Kincaid, and I'd like to introduce you to him. Chris Kincaid is the Chief Technology Officer at the University of Redlands, where he oversees the systems and networking management, information security, cloud operations, client services, and the media services teams. Chris has been at the University of Redlands for 14 years in various positions, starting out as a systems administrator. Prior to that, he spent 6 years in public safety IT. Chris has his MBA from California State University, San Bernardino. In his free time, he enjoys sports, video games with his kids, and watching true crime documentaries with his wife. And I'd like to hand this over to you, Chris. And could you tell us a little bit about the University of Redlands, please?
Sure. Thank you, Carl. University of Redlands, we are a small liberal arts college in Southern California. Under normal circumstances, we have about 1,800 residential students and about 4,000 students in our graduate and professional schools. And we have about 1,000 faculty and staff. Of that, 33 members of the IT department. And then, as you can see here, we have about 1,700 trees on our campus. So our objectives for our IAM project that we undertook recently. It's just really to simplify the provisioning process across all platforms. Currently we use Colleague as our SIS system. Those integrations usually involve one of our developers or a data engineer going in and creating flat file dumps of our student records to be offloaded into various, the SaaS platforms we use or the other applications that we use that we host on-prem. Secondly, to improve our deprovisioning processes. So much of that relies upon HR notifying us that, hey, somebody left, and we'll do an audit at the end of the year and find out that there's 10 people that quit that we never found out about. And then also, and then automating that student process. We let students retain accounts for up to 6 months after they separate. And that's a very manual, intensive process that we have one individual that goes through and pretty much handles that whole thing. So a lot of times it turns into 9 months to a year. Sometimes it gets forgotten about and, skipped altogether. So we wind up with, 1,000 extra student accounts every year sometimes. And to enable secure and consistent access of resources across the globe, especially with the pandemic and everybody going home and remote learning, is we have students and faculty that are accessing our network from pretty much the entire globe, all over the world. And finally, just to automate everything. Like I've mentioned, most of our process are very manual, at least for the vast majority of it. And a strong desire to have that automation in place to eliminate mistakes, eliminate delays. Some of our challenges that we faced is finding vendors with knowledge of some of the higher ed specific systems. Colleague can be very tricky sometimes. Our implementation is very customized, so that further impacts it, and things that should work one way don't because of those customizations. Our employee resources for implementation, like Jake said, everybody's got fewer and fewer employees, and having a high impact upon them to implement a system is not going to go over very well. As threading the eye of an ever-changing needle. Since we've started down this IAM project, in the last 6 months, we've decided to get our Colleague implementation hosted by Lucian in the cloud. We've began an upgrade of our LMS system into a SaaS hosted platform. So it's always changing, and trying to lock down that specific configuration has been very difficult. And then lastly, one challenge we've had is an organizational view that IAM is an ITS process and a problem. By that I mean we have the onboarding discussions for different SaaS platforms or different applications, and they may have that API for integrations as a separate component. And when we say, hey, we need that for onboarding, offboarding, provisioning, it's always, well, if you want it, you can pay for it. It's not something that's of value for us, therefore it's on you guys. So that's been another challenge. Sweet. Next slide, please, Carl. So just kind of a history, some of our provisioning journeys. It began back when I started. We created Active Directory accounts by, a Visual Basic script that ran against a text file that an individual would download from our Colleague instance, stick it on a file share, and we had to remember that 3 o'clock every day, go log in and manually run this script. And so our first big provisioning overhaul was changing that into a PowerShell script that ran on a schedule. So the individual still has to go in, download the script, but PowerShell would run and it would take care of all the steps. And, over the years, we've had to add on Microsoft 365 and the Exchange Online portions and licensing. And then lastly, we've moved more towards using Azure AD for a lot of things, so that does take care of at least the provisioning up there. Licensing is handled through group memberships. We've implemented, using API calls to our LMS and using the script to update some MySQL tables to kind of facilitate that LMS and the single sign-on process. So, next slide, please, Carl. So our single sign-on journey, we started off with Active Directory and LDAP, and that did provide that single sign-on. You had one password, one account, but you had to log in everywhere you went. And a lot of people, were unhappy with that, wanted to see that change. So, we actually, our first attempt, we had a developer that created a SSO link between Active Directory and Moodle. So if you logged into our Moodle implementation through our portal, it sent it to Moodle saying, with a token that said, this is who it is. Well, unfortunately, our Moodle server was not blocking robots. So Google crawled it, somehow got the token for this individual's account and published the results on their page. So if you Googled University of Redlands Moodle, and clicked on the link, you would be in this individual's Moodle account. So moved over to ADFS after we started playing around with Office 365 a few years ago and required that federated authentication. Began federating our authentications to a lot of our applications. Our developers, every little thing they did was using ADFS for authentication. And then we implemented a few years ago Duo for multi-factor authentication. That went real smooth, plugs right into ADFS, and we rolled that out to our student body about 2 years ago. And it had great success and has really cut down on the amount of security issues that we've had to deal with. In fact, the ones we still have had to deal with has been through individuals that pleaded and with our tech support team that deactivated their multi-factor account, and then they turn around and get compromised within a week. So, and then lastly, we've been moving a lot into Azure AD and using their federated services and have really been exploring their multi-factor authentication. So next slide, please. So kind of our next steps, that we feel that we're in a good place with the authentication / SSO part. We have begun an implementation with Quick Launch for the provisioning piece. It does provide that authentication, that SSO, that probably once the provisioning piece and everything's put in place and kind of matures, that we will reevaluate that. But a lot of these authentication SSO changes have come within the last 2 years, and we just feel that there's a lot of change fatigue. In fact, Azure AD provides a self-service password reset functionality that we had just rolled out in March, right before the pandemic hit. So we're kind of don't want to roll that quick launch functionality out just yet, but it is something we have in our tool house. But yeah, they're definitely excited for quick launch and the provisioning, getting more into that and getting our colleague instance tied into our HR platform that we're using, and all the one-off little SaaS for that every department has. And my team spends probably onboarding 2 or 3 applications a month for the campus. And it's just kind of lastly, really exploring Azure AD for the MFA portion and to replace Duo, and then possibly just moving into Azure AD and eliminating our ADFS footprint altogether.
All right. Thank you, Chris. That was great. Got a quick question for you, but first, our last poll for the EdTalk today. Do you utilize single sign-on for all applications? If not, what holds you back from deploying the capability? Yes, no, exploring, too expensive, not enough time or staff, which we all talked about today, and working on or deploying a solution. Chris, you sounds like you have a lot going on there with these different systems, and you're doing a constant evaluation process on trying to get everything to integrate and work together, and you're making some choices. How much are you working directly? I kind of spoke with Jake a little bit about this, but with the departments involved, HR, registrar, and others, I know that, it's always a struggle kind of rolling out an IT project, especially one that weaves its way so intricately into the fabric of the institution. Anybody that you're talking to that is kind of helping with the workflows, or are they able to accommodate the changes that you're making into their environment?
Presently, at the stage that we're at with our quick launch implementation, it's really affecting only IT processes.
Okay.
But as we get out like into that HR, and that's going to change the way that they do some things, then yes, we'll be dealing with each individual department as we bring on that portion of the environment.
Yeah, I can. It's difficult, kind of trying to juggle everything and also manage your end users, because it's going to directly affect every constituent you have. Here's the results from our poll that just ran. Do you utilize single sign-on for our apps? If not, what holds you back? And looks like yeah, a lot. About half of our attendees, or at least those who responded to the poll, were saying, yes, we do utilize single sign-on. Some don't. Some are exploring. Some, of course, it's too expensive, and that's one of the things Campus Consortium is trying to, determine, like low expense solutions. We need to find those because everybody's going to have to buy into them at some point. Not enough time or staff. We've discussed that as an issue. And then some are working on deploying a solution as we speak. So it looks like there's quite a range of involvement. And again, I appreciate the audience kind of picking up on the polls and participating in the presentation. So Chris and Jake, great presentation. We're getting close to time here. We had a couple questions in the chat, which we were able to answer about the recordings, and a couple questions about quick launch. But with the remaining few minutes that we have left, I just wanted to see if you had any closing comments or anything else you wanted to add. And I know that you'll be available after this is over for any questions from the audience, and that we'll post this on the Campus Consortium website. So any closing comments?
Yeah, as far as we've looked at many different vendors for the provisioning, deprovisioning piece, and the cost is really high. It's over $100,000 a year for our environment. We wouldn't have been able to get on board with quick launch without working through Campus Consortium. It really trims down that cost to what it's more of like $100,000 over a 5-year period. So it's
I couldn't
definitely.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
It's definitely worth following up and trying for the grants. There's a lot of value there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of really cool tools out there, but a lot of them are out of education's reach, especially smaller schools. We just don't have the budget to do some of this stuff. So this absolutely helped us again solve some problems I wasn't even sure I had. So.
Well, Chris and Jake, thanks very much. And speaking of those grants, there are two applicable to what you've been working through now. These are in-kind grants with a partner. Quick Launch is who you mentioned before. We will work closely with the school and with the partner. we are here to support higher education and be that liaison between the school and the partner to ensure, you're not just getting the cost savings, but you're getting quality and value from the services that you would be buying. And it's not just year one, it's a term. So you will be covered over time. You put something like this in your institution, you can't just walk away after 1 year. You really need that support ongoing, and that's the role Campus Consortium plays. So again, anybody's interested, there's a student staff onboarding and offboarding identity management in-kind grant available right now, and there is also one for single sign-on and smart password. You can see these grants and others at the campusconsortium.org website, and this presentation will be available. We will post this up on the website, and you'll be able to get that. And any questions that we weren't able to answer today, we will make sure that we talk with Chris and Jake, and we post those questions up there as well. I want to thank everyone for taking the time. Time is precious. I know we're in the spring semester for many of you, and it's a very busy time. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I encourage you to contact Campus Consortium, because there's many other services that we provide. We are very big on collaboration and communication, and helping solve problems without reinventing the wheel. And that doesn't always have to mean in buying something. It can mean just communicating with other schools to find out something that they did. And we love connecting schools. So I want to thank you, Chris and Jake, today for a great presentation. I appreciate that. And we'll follow up after this. And any questions, please forward them to campusconsortium.org. And happy to talk with anybody who's interested in higher education and the Campus Consortium mission. For now, have a great day. Stay safe out there. And until next time, take care.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.